So I was diagnosed with depression when I was 12, but I've always been a very afraid to be alone kid. For me, being alone was so scary, and it wasn't like I was scared of my own thoughts. It was more of just like abandonment. And so that sense of abandonment has always been within me, just like that fear. I would say like that's my greatest fear. I love being sad. I love wallowing. And I did that a lot in college and high school, and that it completely deteriorated like my relationships with other people, with my education. Like it was a constant battle for me to get out of bed. I had a lot of bullying growing up from my appearance. No one liked the way I looked. Everyone called me ugly. It completely damaged my sense of self.
Welcome to this week's episode of Fearless, I'm in a Situation. On this week's episode, Janani will share her experience coping with depression, toxic relationships, and how she constantly struggles to overcome her fears and achieves her goals of owning a digital magazine and advocating for mental health through her influencer platform. Before I introduce you to her, I would like to share some findings about mental health in Indian women, according to an article titled Depression in Women in the Indian Context from the Indian Journal of Psychiatry, to provide some context to this episode. According to the WHO, the World Health Organization, major depressive disorder is the most important precursor of suicide and is the second cause of global disease burden by this year, 2020. The WHO states that the burden of depression is 50% higher for females than males, and Indians are reported to be among the world's most depressed. In India, the prevalence of depression is 9%, and of major depressive episode is 36%. And the average age of onset of depression is 32 years old. Depressive disorders affect almost 10% of the United States population, with 2 to 3 times more females than males affected. In India, the higher rates of depression have been reported in the rural communities compared to the urban populations. Up to 20% of those attending primary health care in developing countries suffer from the often linked disorders of anxiety and depression, but the symptoms of these conditions are often never recognized. And these are just people who are attending and have primary health care. What about those who do not even have health care? The number of cases of depressive disorder in females is way higher than men and is a consistent finding in India. Women have the greatest risk for developing depressive disorders during their childbearing years. Psychosocial events such as role stress, victimization, sex-specific socialization, internalization, coping style, disadvantaged social status, and perceived stigmas of mental illness more in females have all been considered to contribute to the increased vulnerability of women to depression. Mental illness is important to understand, especially in the Indian community. It affects our bodies, our minds, and ultimately can lead to the regression of our mental, emotional, and physical health. Let us all bring our minds together to combat these stigmas in the Indian community. I hope this episode helps us understand the importance of doing just that. As a disclaimer, this week's episode has extremely sensitive topics and some content may be triggering. Hi everybody, welcome to Fearless Chapter 1. Today I have Janani Venkatesan. Janani is a woman of many things. She's a social media influencer. She's also owns her own magazine called The Indian Standard, and she is an avid mental health advocate. So welcome Janani. Thank you so much for being here. I super appreciate you being here. So tell us a little bit about who you are and what you stand for, and welcome yourself to this entire world out here.
Like she said, my name is Janani. I call myself a mental health advocate just for formality's sake. But honestly, I just value talking about some of the shit that I go through and some that other people go through too. And that falls into a convenient umbrella of mental health, but really it's more of like a lifestyle kind of understanding of the self, spirituality sort of connection. But that's way too long to fit in a bio, so I just kind of stuck with writer, content creator, mental health advocate, just so that people can kind of understand what I'm about. Starting the magazine, becoming a content creator, those were all just kind of leverages into what I can just, talk about just bring perspective into my real life. Just we all go through some shit, and I just kind of wanted to bring light to that.
Great. Well, today we're going to talk about some of that shit that you've gone through, because I know that a lot of people will find connections with that, and a lot of people will resonate with that. So I really do appreciate you being here and having this conversation within the Indian communities. Tell us what inspired you to really truly understand your mind, your body, and your soul.
Honestly, it's not one thing. I think a lot of people can kind of relate to this in that, when we take time to understand ourselves, it's not like one thing when we wake up and being like, okay, I'm going to make this day so much better, especially when you're in the pit of depression. It doesn't really like click like that unless you are truly on the way to breakthrough. But for me, I still haven't gotten to that point where I'm like, okay, I'm going to be 100% okay all the time. And I don't think that's realistic. So for me, it was mind, body, and soul has just been something that I've always paid attention to in terms of I believe that if you correct one, you are correcting all of them. So just because you work out to, improve your body, it also impacts your mind, it impacts your soul a lot, like your whole physique changes and your mind and your soul. So just like that, reading can kind of help every aspect of you. So every single part that I like to talk about impacts your entire mental health journey. So when I realized that, it was during quarantine. I think a lot of us kind of really found what we were interested in during quarantine because we had time to ourselves. We really had that. For me personally, I was, we were kicked out of school, and I was just about to graduate from my senior year of college, and I had all this extra time. I was like, okay, like I've been wanting to do social media for like years now. I've always had a blog. Let's take it to another level. And it was really my boyfriend who encouraged me to start talking about mental health on my social media platforms. So I literally had 1,000 followers in May. So that it just kind of blew up for me just because I was being authentic within myself. And I wish I could say that there was one moment where I realized that this was what I was going to do, but I just kind of just talked about what I was going through, and I've never connected to talking about beauty and fashion, but I wanted to be in the social media space. So I, in some sorts, just kind of created a path for myself because I don't have much to say when it comes to beauty and fashion. But at the same time, I didn't want to post a picture that didn't have any meaning to it. So I didn't want to like post a picture that just said like happy Monday or something, like I wanted to have some depth, but I didn't know what to go into depth for. Um, and then I realized the only thing that I do, and especially in my friend group, is I advise. And so I've had to tiptoe and figure out my own voice because I really hate when people advise me when I'm going through my depressive state. So I was like, well, I don't want to do that to somebody else. So I've tried to figure out, okay, instead of advising, let's bring awareness. So that's kind of where the advocacy kind of comes from. Yeah, I would say that understanding my mind, body, and soul, it's an ongoing feat. And I think that a lot of people are going through that in terms of, I don't think you can be 50 years old and still understand mind, body, and soul. It has nothing to do with maturity or age. It has everything to do with how you understand the world around you. Are you paying attention to the lessons being learned?
Right. And so what you point to is awareness, right? Awareness of what's going on in your reality, regardless of what's happening, right? So that awareness is super key. Like you said, when you're 50, when you're 60, it really is bringing yourself back to your reality and truly understanding what's going on. Now, that being said, I know that we've had a previous conversation before today, and you mentioned that, I mean, you sound like a really, really aware person, right? And so when someone's super aware of everything going on in their reality, I feel like, they absorb all of the energies of their reality. So in a previous conversation, you mentioned that you super struggled with depression when you were younger. And I want you to tell that story to everybody who's watching this, everybody who's listening, so that they can truly like start resonating with it, or even seeing how amazing you are now and what your journey was, you know?
So I was diagnosed with depression when I was 12, but I've always been a very like afraid to be alone kid. I'm a born and bred extrovert. I think I've mentioned this to you before. I don't even have a single introverted tendency within me. For me, being alone was so scary. And it wasn't like I was scared of my own thoughts. It was more of just like abandonment. And so that sense of abandonment has always been within me, just like that fear. I would say like that's my greatest fear. I had so much go down in such a short period of time. The common denominator has to be me. So I decided, like, in that moment, I was like, okay, I can't sit here and constantly be the victim. I can't sit here and constantly be like, I feel bad for like that whole self-pity. I can't do that anymore. Like, I need to move on with my life. So what do I need to do to take those next steps? I had 1,000 contacts in my phone. I have like maybe 87 now. I do have 87 because that's how neurotic I am. And like I have 87. I literally just deleted like 900 people from my phone. I went through and purged my social media. I went through and just said, okay, you know what, what kind of emotion does this person elicit in my immediate reaction? If it's not positive, it doesn't need to happen anymore. And if I don't need their phone number, then they can reach out to me on Snapchat or Instagram. Like, you don't need my phone. I don't need to see their number on my phone. That was really helpful for me.
I commend you for, first of all, being here on my podcast, regardless of what's going on in your life. And I truly appreciate that. And I also commend you for, a lot of people who are depressed, and, I have a lot of mental health going on in my family members as well. And I see it all the time. I saw it growing up in Goa. But the thing is that people don't really know how to get up, right? How to pick yourself up. And how did you pick yourself up and say, okay, I'm going to delete some names and numbers on my phone, and I'm going to start the process to get better? I would like you to sort of share that, because, I know you said that you're still going through it right now, but the main part is picking yourself up, even if it's not like picking yourself up permanently, right? It's about just picking yourself up. So how did you do that?
In terms of the phone thing, I can answer that. I never looked at it as that being a self-help tendency. I think that the way that my brain operates, and I think that this is a lot of other people, when they're depressed, they are addicted to that sadness. I know I am. Like, I know for a fact that I love being sad. I love wallowing. And I did that a lot in college and high school, and that it completely deteriorated like my relationships with other people, with my education. Like, it was a constant battle for me to get out of bed. And when you are addicted to that sadness, when someone says like, how do you like, oh, you need to help yourself, you kind of want to do it less. And so I never looked at anything that I did positively for my life as a self-help tendency, even though now I can sit here and be like, yeah, that definitely was you trying to preserve your mental health. So I guess it's just like, I personally, I don't want to be like this all the time. I actually do, despite everything. I think life is the most beautiful gift of all. I think that we all in this world are capable of like insane things. And I think that channeling that is the most difficult part. But the moment that you recognize that all of us are capable of being the next whoever that you look up to, that in and of itself is like what can change the game for you in terms of getting out of bed. I knew that I was capable of whatever I set my mind to, because I believe everyone is. So, if everyone is, then I'm no exception, right? Because I'm not anything special in terms of that. So I definitely just always, I don't have a good answer, because I don't know. Like, I just tend to not think about that as a blessing. I just kind of am like, oh, like, okay, I have work today at 9 a.m. Like, I gotta go. Or I have this call today up this podcast, I gotta go. Like, no matter what I have to do it. And so I've been putting a lot of things on my to-do list. I put things in my calendar, and I'm like, okay, you got to take a shower today. Like, you can't just sit here. It's 3 days in. If you're depressed as shit, like, you have to get up and you have to take a shower. I will schedule in showering. I will schedule in a workout. I will schedule how many like waters I drink a day, just to maintain that, because otherwise I won't do it.
One thing that you said, really, really, it just illuminated in my head, like this idea of seeing yourself, your best self, right? Like knowing that you have the potential to be the best person you could ever be, and the best person for the world to see, right? And I think that's a takeaway what you just said, right? So, even though you're depressed and you don't want to get out of bed, you know your potential. You know that you have the capabilities and the skills and the organizational skills to change the world potentially one day, right? Or change the world right now. I mean, what you're doing right now on social media and really not talking about your own experiences, I mean, that must be super hard for you to do too. I mean, this podcast is probably it's super hard for you to do too. So I appreciate you sharing your story. And one thing that you said earlier, I want to go back to that, is these things that happen to a lot of women and perhaps men, but we can only speak from our own experiences, right? In high school, right? And also in the Indian communities. So you talked about having this facade, right? And having to have this facade, right? I'm wondering if your parents, or your families, told you what to do while growing up, or was it just this facade that you thought you needed to have because of everything that was happening around you in your family and in your community?
For sure. Like, my parents are very, like, kind of unbelievably chill. They never told me what to do, basically, but except when it came to my education. That's when they laid down the law. Of course, that's how most parents are extremely obsessive about education, which rightfully so. I went to college. I did fine. I had graduated with finance and English as a degree. I stuck through it, but I was too afraid to just be like, yeah, actually, I much rather prefer like writing or like creatively doing things or like publishing works. Um, and so I did whatever I could to skirt past that reality that I had in my mind. And that became a lie. Let's like not even say the word facade. It's a lie. I straight up lied to myself and to the world around me that I was ready to do whatever my parents wanted me to do. And I still uphold a nine. It's not even a 9 to 5. It's a freaking 8 to 6 job. I still have that. It's still within what my parents want me to do. But of course, I also want to do it now because it puts a roof above my head, and that's super important for me. So to like have my own roof. And so it's just, I mean, how good of a liar are you as a brown girl? I think a lot of us are. And a lot of us have to be to survive, because otherwise a brown dude is going to fuck us over, or our parents are going to manipulate us into thinking that we want something that we really don't, and we're fulfilling their dreams. So I don't know. I mean, I definitely, my facade was built at the age of like maybe 10 or 11, that I was going to be this super achieving type A, great student, when in reality I struggled every single day throughout high school and college.
And so, I mean, it sounds like your facade was linked to your depression. But how do we combat that, right? Like, I mean, as a community, how do we, say that it's okay to be who you are at a very young age, and then help support that, And it doesn't necessarily, I think that a lot of kids, we can help them, support them be who they are, but also they can be who they are and earn a living based on that, right? It doesn't have to be either or, because I think that's a lot of the times in the Indian communities, it's like if you're not in the finance or medical or accounting or these industries that make a ton of money, that you can't make any money. I was a writer growing up too, and I got a lot of people saying you're not going to make a living out of that, right? So how do we help support and build a community that we can support people and kids and children and a next generation of leaders to be who they are at a very young age, because we don't want people to be in their heads so much, right? And we want to build that mind, body, spirit balance.
So when I was a child, I was like 5 years old. Um, they asked me what I wanted to be when I grow up, and it was a mom. I have always, always, always wanted to be a mother. That has been a priority for me my entire life, and it still is. So when the day, if I get blessed enough to have my own children, or raise adopted kids, the number one thing that I will do is to not enforce the sense of maturity means age. Like, they're not, mutually exclusive. And I think that when you enforce that kid's imagination is worthwhile, it makes them more practical within themselves. They will figure it out. They know what's going to put a roof above their head when they're 15. They realistically know that you can't sell art at $10 a piece and have that put over a roof of your head. I think that if I am transparent about my expenses as a parent, I'm transparent about the income that I make, saying this is what it takes for you to live. Can you make that within whatever you want to do? If the answer is no, then it's like, okay, have this and have another job. It doesn't have to be a whatever job like the one that I'm working right now. Have many, or have multiple jobs. You're going to work your ass off, then work your ass off. If you want to achieve your dream and if you want to struggle and you're ready for that struggle, then to go do it, but you're not doing it on my dime. I think giving that separation to kids at an age that is good enough for them to make their own decisions. So I'm thinking, like, I'm not a parent, so I wouldn't know the best answer, but maybe college time, just being like, okay, like, you pursue whatever you got to do, and like teaching them that they can come to me for these things. I think that a lot of parents don't allow their kids to talk to them because they judge them. So if you just allow them to just feel like, okay, I'm talking to my friend, I need to call up my friend who happens to be my mom or my dad, that's like my priority in finding a life partner, is that they have the same mentality as me. Like, I can't have a husband who's thinking something different. They need to prioritize their kids the way that I do, and they need to prioritize their imagination and their dreams, because that can lead into whatever mental health, depression, whatever sort of issue later. We have no idea how it's going to manifest. So openness with your child, not being so judgmental about what they have to say. Also, understanding that you don't know the world either as a parent. Like, you know the world how much ever the 40 years have given you. You don't know any much more than that. Just like that, the 15-year-old knows whatever the 15-year-old knows. Those 15 years have taught them. How can you expect them to know what a 20-year-old would know? Like me, my parents would always tell me, you don't know the world. You don't know the world. It's like, I know exactly how much ever I'm supposed to know. And so do you. You don't know the world either. So I would never say that to my kid, because I don't want them to feel any smaller than they already do within my house.
You mentioned to me that you were in a toxic relationship when you were in college, and that certainly, added to your depression. And so go ahead and tell us stories about this, and then I'll dissect it.
It started off really small. Like, within our first week of dating, like literally maybe day 3 or day 4 of us dating, it was, I'm gonna see you at this time, and then he would be there 3 hours later. And that's how it started. It started off really small, where at day 3 of us being together, I couldn't even say anything. I couldn't be mad because it was day 3. Like, I'm not gonna sit there and look like that girl. Like, I don't want to be that. No one wants to be that girl, you know. And so I did not want to call him out a lot in the beginning of our relationship, because I was also getting to know him, and I had never been in like a serious relationship, and that's the kind of direction that you could tell right off the bat that that's where it was heading. And he was this can kind of go with bullying too. So he was a well-known individual in my college. Like, everyone knew who he was, everyone liked him. And he he was like at the forefront of all of the brown community. And before that, I had not been introduced to the brown community at all. So again, this is sophomore year of college. Like my entire freshman year was surrounded by a whole other tragic experience that maybe we can get about later. But that's what I was in, and I was living in a single apartment my sophomore year, so I didn't really know anybody. And so, especially in the brown community. And so he introduced me to all of that. And coming from his perspective as, let's name him. What should we name him? Let's name him Rahul. Okay, that's like a very typical Indian name. That's not. But so I was always known as Rahul's girlfriend, not Janani. I was never known as Janani. No one gave a shit what my name was. No one gave a shit about who I was. I was just always this person's girlfriend. And I was a huge part of his life, and he was an even bigger part of mine. And it started off with it started really fast. So him asking me to stay over every single night, him asking me to be with him all the time. And I obviously, as a young 19-year-old, I believe I was very naive, thinking that was flattery rather than possessiveness. And so I was like, oh my gosh, he wants to be around me all the time. My sense of abandonment is fulfilled. I don't have to deal with that. I can just go along with this. And so then it became if I wore a shirt, I had this bralette that I really, really like. And if I wore a tank top that showed the bralette, he would call me a whore. If I had a little bit of cleavage showing and we were at a bar and I would go up to him and being I remember this it was yesterday. I was wearing this shirt and I guess he thought it was revealing, and this guy kept hitting on me at the bar. I was it was probably end of junior year. So I'm about to be 22, I guess, whatever. It doesn't even matter. But I'm whatever, we're at this bar and this guy's hitting on me and I go up to him and I'm like, Rahul, can you please, hello, can you help me? Can I stand by you for the night? This guy's being super creepy. And he was just well, you probably shouldn't have worn that. You're asking for it. Genuinely said you're asking for it, kind of like those memes that everyone says. And I was there's no way you just said that to me. And in my brain, I still did not register as toxic. Because this is all I knew of him. This is who he was. He was verbally abusive. He was physically abusive. And he completely, he had not complimented me once in 2 years. He did not say one nice thing about me. And he would also tell everyone in the entire Indian circle that I was crazy. And so I was now this crazy psycho girlfriend who had trust issues with him because of whatever he would do. Not coming home whenever he said he would come home, or, flaking on me, or kind of standing me up, just doing all kinds of, flaky shit that would give me trust issues. And he had weird relationships with the girlfriends, and he just kind of made me not trust him ever. And then on top of that was super physically abusive, was just a very angry individual, and he would completely belittle me. And then on top of all of that, I didn't even realize that I was being sexually abused for 2 years. I thought, no, you don't get, raped by your boyfriend. It's all has to be just inbuilt consent. But I realized I didn't want it. And I only realized that I was being, sexually abused until after. Because I realized literally it was lockdown, and I was whoa, that's because I read something that was it was such an obvious thing. It was consent is consent. If you don't want it, then it's not consent. And I didn't want it. So and it was just it never clicked. And I think that that's the thing with toxic relationships, is that it doesn't click until it's too late. And then you know that you have to get out. And I wrote this thing. Basically, it was I didn't want to get out. I had to. And so it was you still have love for the person, you still care about them, and you still want to be the person who fixes them, but you can't. And I think that when you are faced, especially with girls, we just have a lot more to lose when we're in these relationships than guys, unfortunately. We just have more on the plate, because when you have sex with a guy, oftentimes it's the girl that faces most of the repercussions, whether it's an infection or whether it's actual pregnancy. Like, the girls are the ones who go through the shit, not the guys. And like, you don't hear about yeast infections for guys. Like, that's a girl thing. And like, there's just so many different things that girls go through that men just kind of, whatever, like, I'm just gonna fuck her and move on. And I think with toxic relationships, you really don't realize you're being abused until someone tells you. And even then, you're kind of like, no, like, that's just how he is. I would justify his actions all the time. I would make videos upon videos with my friends, being like, I'm not going to get back together with him. I promise you I will not get back together with him. And then I would get back together with him, and then my friend would send me the video, and then I would delete the conversation as if it didn't happen. Like, it's that kind of shit where I would consistently go back, and because I needed his validation. He did not give me that validation for so long, and I wanted to please him so badly, and I wanted him to think that I was worthy, and so I would do whatever it took in order to get that validation. Because when someone is constantly tearing you down, what do you want more than anything from them? You want to know that you're okay. You want to know that you're still a good girlfriend. You want to know, like, all of those things.
I'm sorry that you went through that, and I mean, I wouldn't wish that upon anybody. Um, but when you say that, he was like this from the get-go, right? From the very beginning. And do you think it's because he was popular, that you still stuck with him, or was it because you already had a broken self-esteem, or you were already sort of broken that you still like you wanted him to give you that attention, and therefore you stuck with him on and off for 2 years?
The answer is yes. It's definitely both. Like, with the popularity thing, I didn't care about his status in the society. I more cared about, if I lost him, would I be losing all of these other friends too? And it definitely was that case. And obviously, I shouldn't have been worried about who I was going to lose, because they were bad friends anyway. And that's kind of where the bullying comes in, because I was kind of I was just ripped apart by the Indian community in college. I'd always been ripped apart by communities, and since I was 12, like I mentioned, or 13. I've always been that girl that no one liked, and it was because of something that I was never able to pinpoint. I've always wanted a sense of community, and I will never get it because I want it so badly.
Mm-hmm.
And so, since that fear of abandonment, since that fear of being alone, it was just so important to me to hang on for dear life, ironically, with him. Because he gave me that. He gave me that sense of community. And even if it was false, I was okay to pretend. I was okay to have, these relationships where I would give whatever I wanted to give, which, however I treat friends, I would do that for them. And I was okay with not receiving that in return. And that also comes back to, like what you said, low self-respect. I didn't have any sort of sense of self. I didn't know who I was. I didn't, like, that sounds so cheesy, but like, I didn't even recognize that I was a person that also was allowed to be upset and eat, sleep, breathe. I didn't even know that I had that option. I thought of that as a luxury, to be upset. So I, just stuck it out because I didn't have any other choice, in my opinion, or in my mindset at the time.
So how did you finally get out of what was the final straw?
See, the thing about us is that we were always on and off. Um, I I would do my best to, like, move on, and he kind of wouldn't let me. Like, he would not let me break up with him. So I'd be like, I need to go see other people. You need to see other people. Let's just move on. So I even took the whole summer, and I saw other people, and I don't know, I don't think he saw other people, but like I did. We broke up in, last May. We broke up for the whole summer, and like I did my own thing, and then school came back around. And it was just like, okay, this is just convenient. Let's get back together. And then finally in October we broke up, and after that we were still seeing each other. Like, we were still talking, we were still attending parties together, but we weren't together, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So December comes around, it's like finals week. I have a massive paper due. It's like 10 pages long, this English thesis that I had to write. And I'm writing this paper, but it's like my friend's going away party because she's going to study abroad for that next semester. So it's my friend's going away party. I wasn't going to drink because I was literally in the corner of that party writing my paper. And then I go up and it's at this like fraternity house that Rahul and my current boyfriend, Kieran, founded. Um, and yeah, that in of itself is a lot. So I go up to Kieran's room and I'm like, this is nothing romantic. Like, I was like, hey, you're studying. Like, can I study in your room too? Everyone's being like really loud and obnoxious downstairs. And he was like, yeah, of course, obviously. So then it's like 11 p.m. Everyone leaves for the bars. Now it's 4 a.m. I'm still writing my paper. Kieran is still working. We're still doing like our own separate things, but I'm in the same room as him. So Rahul barges in and goes, "Are you fucking him?" Like in front of everybody. And I was like, "What?" And then he was like, "I know that you're like so like easy, like you're gonna definitely go find the next person that you can because obviously who else is gonna sleep with you?" In my head, I was like, "Thank God," because this whole time this abuse was going on behind closed doors, but now everyone can see. Now everyone could stop calling me crazy because I was not making this up. So in my head, I was like, "Oh my God, thank God, my time has come. I can finally just release." And then I like took him home, and I like we were about to leave, and there's this giant wooden door. Like think of an 100-year-old house. So he opens the door to leave the house. He opens the door and slams it so hard that if I hadn't moved out of the way, I would start bleeding out of my head. Like so hard in anger. And he did that intentionally to crush me. Um, and that was the moment where everyone came running downstairs. They're like, "Oh my God, Janani, are you okay? Are you okay?" And I was like, "I'm fine. Like, I'm chilling. I've been chilling for 2 years. Where the fuck were you?" And I like, that was my moment where I was like, okay, I'm going to just rip this off. Luckily, winter break was the week after. He was going on a cruise, didn't have access to his phone. I sent him a quick paragraph. "Sorry, see ya. We're never hanging out ever again." And that was the end of that.
And he never tried to contact you
Oh,
or
he
anything?
did. Oh, he
Okay.
did. And I didn't feel the need to block him. I just would not respond. It would just be like, I was like, "I'm not hung up. Like, you are. So you deal with it on your own. Me blocking you is not going to change anything. Like, I'm still not going to respond." Saw him, the next semester. And then, of course, I started dating Kieran. And, me and Kieran have this very interesting history for 3 years that other people were like, "Whoa, this is out of nowhere," but it really wasn't. Um, and so I got a lot of judgment being like, "Wow, you're dating another brother in the fraternity," or "Wow, you're such a whore," or "Wow, you're this." And I'm like, to be honest, like, I don't think anyone has the right to judge me because this is how, like, everyone called him a rebound. And I was like, if this is a rebound, this is the healthiest relationship I have ever been in my entire life. Like, this man, Kieran, is an example of shit gets better. Um, and not all men suck.
So I'm glad that you experienced Kieran right now, and I'm
Yeah.
glad that it's good for you now, and that you have a good man in your life to kind of help you heal too and support you through that process. That's important. So, what advice would you give somebody who's going through what you went through, and who's currently listening to this and thinking, I'm in a situation and maybe I don't know it, but all I know is that this person's hurting me.
If I could offer any advice, it would just be to talk to your parents if you can, or talk to someone who will not waver in how much they care about you. That's important. Don't talk to everybody about your problems with your boyfriend or girlfriend because you don't know necessarily whose side they're on if you're in the same situation that I was, where it was like very within the friend group. Um, I didn't talk about my relationship with my mom because I knew what she would say. She would say break up with him. she would say, just don't deal with it. Because she knew that I was dating him. She had met him many times. Like, she knew that I was in a full relationship, that I wanted to get married to this man. Um, and I wouldn't hide a lot of things to my parents because I knew what I was doing was wrong. I knew that should not have been with him, and I didn't listen. So what I would do is try and talk to someone, just vent if you can, to either yourself or to others, just so that they can be there for you. Because if it really becomes like a physical situation, then you need a house to run to.
So thanks for giving everybody some advice. And I do want to go over one post that you posted on Instagram. So it was fairly recently where you posted a post about saying positivity does not have to mean being happy all the time, and that's very true. But I also want you to tell us the story behind that, maybe, and then perhaps even your definition of what positivity really is and what inspired you.
It's when it means positivity does not mean to be happy all the time. Like, happiness is an emotion. We should not wish ourselves to always be happy. We have to wish ourselves to fill our life with gratitude and contentment. Like, that is it. Happiness and sadness are both emotions which are meant to be fleeting. And so when you're basing what positivity is on a fleeting emotion, that does not make sense to me. And so in my mind, you don't have to be happy all the time, but if you can see the light, even if it's a tiny little glimmer or like a window of hope down the tunnel of your depression, you're doing well. Like, if you're able to sit here and be like what I kind of said earlier, like, if I'm able to sit here and be like, okay, like, yeah, my life is shit, or like, life is great today, or life is shit tomorrow, whatever, but I know that I'm capable of making it great, then fine. Like, that is the amount of positivity that I need in my life for me to be like able to continue. Because why do I need to be happy to continue? I definitely don't need to be. I need to just continue. And there isn't necessarily an emotion related to that, and there can be for some people, but for me, that doesn't work like that. I need to be very realistic about my expectations for myself, and if I monitor my whole life based on my emotion, then I will get carried away. So I just need to ground myself and say, okay, like, if you are not happy today, just get your tasks done and like devote maybe an extra 15 minutes to whatever you want to do that's extra for that day. If you don't want to work out today, don't. That kind of thing. So that's kind of what I mean by that.
Such a wise soul you are.
Oh my goodness, don't give me that.
You really are, though. And I think it comes from your experiences too, and learning from them. So I'm really blown away by you, by the way. So in a previous conversation, this is the juicy part, everybody. You said that in the social media influencer world, and I don't know much about this. I don't know much about it at all. You said that there's a lot of women who copy your posts and honestly, that's plagiarism to me. And I was having a conversation with a friend, like, how do you copyright your Instagram posts? Like, can you? Or, I don't even think you can. I mean, the only thing you can do is share someone else's post. But you mentioned that somebody had copied your post, word to word. And yeah, so tell us about that story, how it makes you feel, and what we need to do about it.
So it was like phrase by phrase, if that makes sense. Like, if I read it to you, my post, and then I read it to you, the person who copied my post, you'd be like, no way. Like, it wasn't so blatant that it was like word for word, but it was enough on the same day for it to be like phrase by phrase. I reached out to this person and I was like, hey, did you derive inspiration from my post? If you did, totally cool. But, just maybe next time, could you give me credit? I really respect your work here. This was a very big influencer. Like, everyone knows this person if you're in the brown community, and on social media, I should say. And I had 3,000 followers at the time. So for someone to be that much bigger and stealing someone so much smaller, I was like, I know I'm on your popular page because you've accidentally you've interacted with me before. That gave me a huge wake up call. That, number one thing for me, the reason why I take my Instagram captions so seriously is because I am a writer. But you see this kind of shit all the time. Like, there are people who copy pictures all the time, like photo shoot ideas, or they copy, content ideas, or like there's trends that go around that get like filtered and processed, and people put their own spin on it, but it's not that far from the original. I also see this happening to other people a lot, where like a TikTok trend will go viral, and then someone will put a tiny spin on it, and then that person who put a tiny spin on it will get all the credit, not the original. My pictures, while I can put time into the aesthetic of how my general feed looks, I won't necessarily put all of my effort into seeking a photographer and seeking like model shots and seeking like different cool outfits and spending a ton of money on that, because that's not my focus. My focus has never been to be a model. And so because of that, I'm not going to get shared as often as everyone else, because I don't have like these iconic pictures. So that's another thing. It's just like this whole social media space is like unbelievably competitive, and everyone is just waiting to be that. Because like lots of Indian girls on social media want to be that one girl that represents all of India. Whereas like I'm Tamil, literally South Indian, and some North Indian person wants to represent me. Or similarly, someone from South India wants to represent all of North India. It's like, no, honey, like we all have our own territories within, even like my own background is like I don't know if there's any Tamil listeners, but like my mom's from Madurai and my dad's from Kumbakonam. Like those are two different places within Tamil Nadu that like, like it doesn't make sense. And like you're from Goa, like so not two people cannot represent Goa, just one person. Like what is that? So I don't know. The social media space is wild. Like people do some crazy shit to kind of stay relevant.
Also, doing things that you can control, right? There are things that you can't control. You can't control, like, somebody else's behavior toward you, or, reaction toward your post. And, that takes some time and detachment, right? Like to do that, because I think on social media, especially these days, because of 2020, we're so attached to our media, like social media, like let's see what this person's doing, and that's all. And it's hard to imagine that as a separate reality, right? Because it's so much ingrained in our reality.
As a person who posts a lot on social media, it's my responsibility to be as authentic to myself as possible. But it's also my responsibility as a consumer of social media to, realize what's real and what isn't. If you're young and like a little bit naive in perspective, that's harder. So that's why it's more important on the social media poster to be authentic, because you have to recognize that not everyone might be on the same like comprehension level as you. So it takes a lot of effort, especially I'm nervous for these younger generations going to be going on social media, because the amount of like influence is kind of crazy. And like if you don't know who is nice and who isn't, you'll be processing all your information from like the wrong people.
100%. And which is why it's so important that we have people in our community that these girls can look up to, right? And know that it's okay, right? Like what you're doing on social media is really like commendable, and you're speaking out about mental health, and you're giving girls an opportunity to connect with you, and you're being a role model too, which is one of the reasons why I reached out to you, because I really respect what you're doing. So one of the other things that really impressed me was the Indian Standards. So tell us a little bit more about this magazine of yours.
So I've always been a blogger, and literally on June 15th of this year, I was like, the blog isn't doing it for me. Like I need a little bit more. So I was like, I need to figure out what I need to do. So I'm just going to make a magazine. I was like on FaceTime with my boyfriend, and I was like, do you like the idea of a magazine? Like, I kind of want to do a magazine. He's like, fuck it, do it. Like, what's going to stop you? And then I was like, okay. And then July 15th, the first issue was done. I just finished it. I sent it to everyone just to, like, look over it. And then August 1st, I published it. And then it's been interesting. I never had any this is, like, really rare for me to not have any quantifiable goals when it came to like a project. Like I usually am like, oh, I want to do this amount of followers, or I want to have this amount of engagement. With this project, I never, and I still don't have any goals when it comes to it. I don't know why that is, because it's not like a conscious decision. I just am posting this because it's like my way to incorporate everything that I love. Like I love fashion and beauty. Again, not enough to speak on it, but I love it as a fact. I love having aesthetically pleasing images. I love photography. I love talking to everybody. I love holding interviews similar to how you're doing. And I also love writing. So this magazine is a perfect way to compile every single thing, and it fulfills my soul. So it releases the first of every month at 11 a.m. Eastern time, and that's just a deadline that I set for myself. And I do correspondence with like all the participants. I even have like a few interviews today, for like setting that up for next issue. I have a lot of fun with it. Like I do themes. I have a whole social media like account dedicated to it, that I'm not very active on. I need to be more active on it. But yeah, it's something that I want to grow into a business, and like eventually sell it in hard copy. But we'll see. I think we're a little bit at the infancy stage for that. So I'm taking my time with this one for the first time.
Well, congratulations on publishing your soul project, and I wish you well with that. I did take a look at an issue, and aesthetically it was really, really pleasing to the eyes, and super. I was like, wow, this is pretty great. And I'm glad that you have an Indian magazine out there for people to look at and women to aspire to. Right? That's great.
Just focus on posting and being consistent on what I love to do. And yeah, just be present in all the moments, because life is actually it's fine. So let's just be here.
I love that. Any last words for us, Janani?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very, very thankful that you gave me the time to ramble about. I don't even know if what I said makes sense. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to episode 3 of Fearless. I truly appreciate you all for watching and listening in to my podcast. I'm trying to bring awareness and engagement to so many topics that are so important to the Indian community and super important to me. We have been repressing the important issues for way too long, and it's about time we start having deeper discussions. Today's topic is an important one to me, a conversation about taking care of our mental health and the constant struggle of identity. I too struggled with this all my life, and I still think that I'm still fighting to be seen. I see lots of people in my large family and friend circle struggle with this too. This week's episode is dedicated to raising awareness for all women, young, married, non-married, with kids, without kids, all Indian women in India and in the world, to please take care of yourself. If you need somebody to talk to and cannot find a therapist, find each other and create a community for each other. Support one another. My website has an open forum where we can have an honest discussion about your needs, how you can take care of yourself, and how we can take care of each other. Learning from my experiences, I know how important it is to have an outlet to let everything out that has been internalized for so very long. Join me in creating that community not only for you, but for many Indian girls and women all over the world who are suffering from many issues and need the support. Janani is such a resilient, strong woman and human being. Here are a few takeaways from our conversation today. 1. If a friendship or a relationship is not serving your mental health, it's okay to get rid of it. You always come first. 2. It might be hard to let go of things and people who you think might be good for you, but we have to think deeper into the purpose of that thing or person in your life. Is it helpful for you? Does it add purpose to your purpose? If not, then it might potentially be toxic or bad for you. Depression is a hard reality to cope with, but it is necessary to face it and find the tools to help us face it daily. We all need a support system that encourages and supports our dreams, goals, and mental state. Sometimes that support comes in the form of a romantic partner, and sometimes it comes in the form of healthy, conscious parents, and many times it comes in the form of a best friend or a community-based relationship or an online forum. All of these ways are outlets to create community and be on your way to healing. And lastly, 5, be yourself and pursue your passions and interests by being realistic about them. Be aware of your mind, body, and spirit at all times of the day and find your support network in whatever way you can. Join me in creating a conscious community to engage, discuss, and be aware of our mental state at all times. Until next week, stay fearless.